Cinderella. Once upon a time, there lived a sweet little girl called Ella. Her mother had died when she was a child, and soon her father too died. She lived with her mean stepmother and her two proud stepsisters. They made Ella do all the housework. "Clean the chimneys, dust the cupboards, iron my clothes," they cried. The young girl was always covered in soot and dust. Hence she was called Cinderella. One day the prince invited all the girls in the kingdom for a ball in the castle. Everyone, including the two stepsisters, were very excited. Cinderella too wanted to go to the ball, but her sisters laughed at her. "Stay at home and scrub the floors," screamed her stepmother. The day of the ball finally came. The stepmother and stepsisters left Cinderella alone at home. She was so disappointed that she began to cry. Suddenly, she saw a shimmering light in the room. A woman with a kind smile and a wand stood in front of her. "Who are you?" asked Cinderella, surprised. The woman replied, "I'm your fairy godmother. I'll help you go to the ball. Now do stop crying." "But I have nothing to wear," sobbed Cinderella. "I can't go to the ball."
Cinderella's fairy godmother appeared. "Cinderella, why are you crying?" she asked. "You wish to attend the ball? Is that not so?" "Yes," cried Cinderella between sobs. The fairy godmother smiled and said, "Well, run into the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella immediately went to get the finest pumpkin she could find. When she brought it, her godmother struck the pumpkin with her wand, instantly turning it into a fine coach, plated with gold and silver. Next, she had Cinderella find some mice, and when she brought the furry little creatures back, the fairy godmother tapped them each with her wand, turning them into 6 fine horses and a coachman. "Well, what do you say?" asked her godmother. "Oh, yes!" cried Cinderella. "But should I go looking like this, in these rags?" Her godmother only touched her with her wand, and instantly Cinderella's rags turned into a dress of white and silver, sparkling with jewels. To top it off, Fairy Godmother gave Cinderella a pair of glass slippers, the prettiest in the whole world. "The spell only lasts until midnight, so promise you will leave the ball before then," warned the godmother. Cinderella promised to return before midnight, thanked her again, and drove off to the ball. When Cinderella made her entrance, the dancing and music stopped as everyone turned to gaze at her beauty. No one recognized her. She was a complete mystery. The prince rushed up to greet her, led her to the most honorable seat by his side, and later took her out for a dance. Cinderella even made time to approach her stepsisters, who still did not recognize her, and shared some of the oranges the prince had presented to her as a gift. The prince never left her side, and Cinderella was enjoying herself so much that she completely forgot the time. When the clock struck midnight, Cinderella was shocked and fled immediately, leaving one of her glass slippers behind in her haste. The prince ran to follow her, but only managed to pick up the glass slipper she left behind. Cinderella managed to get home, but she was quite out of breath and in her dirty old clothes. She was resting in bed when her two stepsisters stumbled into her room. "You stayed really late," cried Cinderella, rubbing her eyes and stretching as if she had been sleeping. "If you had been there, you would have seen the most beautiful princess," exclaimed the eldest sister. "She was so nice to us and had the undivided attention of the prince. Her background is a mystery, and the prince would give anything to know who she was," said the youngest. A few days later, the prince declared that he would marry the woman whose foot fit in the slipper. His soldiers began to try the slipper on all the princesses and duchesses in the court, but it was all in vain. Days later, it was brought to the two sisters, who tried with all their might to make the slipper fit. Cinderella, who saw this, politely asked to try it. Her sisters burst out laughing at the idea, but the prince ordered that everyone in the kingdom should have a try. When Cinderella's foot slid perfectly into the slipper, her sisters were astonished. Cinderella's fairy godmother appeared, and with the flick of her wand, turned Cinderella into the beautiful girl from the ball. The stepsisters dropped to their knees and begged for forgiveness for the awful way they treated her over the years. Cinderella lifted them up and embraced them, saying she forgave them with all her heart. Cinderella was then escorted to the prince, dressed as beautiful as she was at the ball. A few days later, they were married. Cinderella, who was no less good than beautiful, gave her two sisters rooms in the palace, and everyone lived happily ever after. The end.